torn. The sermon gets prepared ahead of time, but sometimes you just don't know what to do with it. The second scripture reading this morning comes to us from the 17th chapter of the Gospel according to Matthew, starting with the first verse. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. May God's blessing fall upon the experiences of Scripture. May it guide the meditations of our hearts and the words of my lips. I'm going to figure that out eventually. Transfiguration. This is one of those readings that comes around every year. This is a story in the life of Jesus that comes to us every single year. It's one that is almost universally, or is universally, the Sunday before Ash Wednesday. Now, Lent is a time of preparation, and this is the story that prepares us for the preparation. You got to be ready to start getting ready. This is the moment when Jesus and a core group of disciples go up to the mountain, which is a holy, thin space between God and the rest of us, and it is a space that Matthew, in his telling of the gospel story, uses often. Because in Matthew's gospel, Jesus is straight out of Hebrew Scripture. And we know from Hebrew Scripture, if you want to meet God, you got to start climbing. If you want to go through that experience, or if you don't, you still have to start climbing. You still have to go up in order to get to that space in between. It's why the temple is built on Mount Zion, the high point in the city of Jerusalem. Mountains are sacred, thin spaces in the Gospels, especially from Matthew. And in this moment, in this thin space of transformation, this time of change that is taking place, the disciples go up, the core disciples go up, the witnesses who will share the story throughout, and they experience theophany, a God moment, a God place, and what they see is 2 prophets there with Jesus. And that's where I was torn with this sermon, because I was going to talk more about change, but I think I want to talk more about these 2 prophets than anything else on this day. Because these 2 prophets that show up aren't just any 2 that are having that conversation with Jesus. It's not like, who was available to talk to Jesus on that day? Oh, Moses and Elijah are here. They've got nothing else going on. They can talk to Jesus. No, they represent something important, and in Matthew's gospel, it is elevated. Moses is the first prophet-priest of the people. And we know when Moses has his time in the sun, so to speak, right? We know the Exodus story that has been laid out before us. We know that Moses fled. He was scared that he would be killed. And we know that Moses has a burning bush experience. And we know that Moses receives direct commands on what to do, his mission. And we know that Moses tries to get out of it, and we know that Moses doesn't. And when he goes and through God receives the people Israel and guides them through the wilderness for 40 years, because we don't ask for directions. For 40 years, they spend a period of time at the foot of Mount Sinai. Exodus story, right? This is all stuff that we've been exposed to or can be exposed to if we want to read that book. The Cecil B. DeMille film is close in a lot of things. And it's Hollywood in a lot of others, but that's okay. And then Moses, for 40 days, goes up on the mountain. And for 40 days, he has God experiences, direct theophany, the cloud, the voice, the commandments, the 10 best teachings, plus other ways of living. That when they come down the mountain are given to the people that they might understand what it is to be the people Israel. Because if we consider the story more fully, when the people go into Egypt, it's a family. A single family. But when they come out, they are a nation, a multitude. An ethnos, the Greek term for us. We get ethnic and ethnicity from it. They are a nation, a people. And as a community, they have to learn what it is to live together. To be a people. That's part of what Moses does. He spends 40 days and comes down and offers these teachings, these guidances. And if we look at the 10 best teachings, the first part is about how we relate to God, but the second part is how we relate to each other. Ways that we can build relationship and damage relationship. Moses does all of that. And so he's there up on the mountain talking to Jesus. And then there's Elijah. He's the prophet that got away. He had a sweet ride. He was the first one whose wheels had flames on them. He is the great prophet of God after Moses. There were others, certainly. But Elijah is one who fled for his life, had a God moment, spent 40 days going to a mountain where he has a theophany, a direct commandment. Elijah, this is what you need to go forth and do. And he did it. It's a hard scripture to wrestle with if we read the Elijah story a little more fully, because the command is not to build peace among the nations. But he is fed, he responds, he has these 40 days, and he is the one who is scooped up without experiencing death. He is the one who is lifted up. He gives his mantle to Elisha in a double portion of power, but Elijah is the one. And by the time that Jesus comes, Elijah is expected to return to prepare the way for the Messiah, the anointed one, the Christ. And so Moses, 40 days on the mountain, receiving the teachings on how to be community. Elijah, 40 days on the mountain, how to recapture the community's faith and exuberance for the living and loving God, are there with Jesus in this moment that he is transfigured and changed. I can only guess that since after this moment, Jesus is done with his Galilean mission and ministry, that in that moment on that mountainside, those two were talking with Jesus about the specific mission that he is now on. The change that has taken place. It's not just transfigured in the sense that he comes down and he has the glow of glory of being with God like Moses did. It's not a metamorphosis or change that takes place because he was scared and now he is emboldened in his faith. It is a change that takes place because Jesus has been proclaiming the realm of God, and now he is going single-mindedly to the cross. It is literally all downhill. From this mountain, the gospel is going to pick up steam, and for the next 40 days of Lent, we will be getting closer and closer to Jerusalem. We'll be getting closer and closer to that moment, and we don't want to rush ahead. We don't want to jump to the end of the story, no matter how well we know it. We need to move on this journey with Jesus. 40 days of preparation, of change and transformation because of a singleness of purpose and mission and ministry. We will be changed. We will be transformed. The fact that we got up this morning means we were different than we were last night. We've all slept. At least we should have. At least a little bit. Some of us need a nap. More sleep. But we have all been changed since we were before. We have changed from even coming into this space and worship beginning. We are different people. Biologically, the act of breathing changes us. By the time we offer ourselves in benediction and rededicate ourselves to mission, we will have been an hour or so different than we were before. But these next 40 days that we're going to enter into, in the light of this transfiguration moment, we're going to find that God is driving us toward a singleness of purpose. We're going to be driven toward Jerusalem and everything that is going on in that place. And we will find that we are accompanied by prophets, by disciples, by people of faith. We will find that we will be church more fully on this day and going forward. We will be transformed. Thanks be to God, and amen.